Well, hello, Victoria. How are you?
Hey, I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to be
Well,
on your show.
well, thank you. And for the record, this is a recording with Victoria Moran. She is a vegan expert. And Victoria, can you, for our viewers, can you explain, there is so much confusion like we were talking about with regards to the term vegan. What does it mean to be vegan?
In the simplest way of explaining it, it simply means a person who chooses to live without exploitation of other beings. So what that means in practical life is that we are pure vegetarians, meaning that we not only avoid eating anybody who had, as has been said, a face or a mama, but we also avoid animal foods, dairy, eggs, that sort of thing, because it's one industry all combined. And the vegan movement started with vegetarians who said, oh my gosh, we want to really do good and less harm, and so it started from a completely ethical basis, but now, of course, a lot of people are vegan or even accidentally vegan for their health. They choose to eat only foods from the plant kingdom because this has been shown to prevent and reverse heart disease and do lots of other great things for people.
That definitely sheds light on that. So I have friends, for example, who are vegetarians, and I know for a fact that they eat eggs, for example. So can you explain what is the difference between vegan and being a vegetarian?
Sure. Well, I was vegetarian for several years because they put eggs and dairy in all the processed foods, and I was dealing with an eating disorder. I was a binge eater, and it was really hard to go to 7-Eleven in the middle of the night and read the labels, and everything seemed to have whey in it or egg albumin. So it has traditionally been a lot easier for people to say, okay, no meat, no fish. I'm a vegetarian, and that's what vegetarian really means. No meat, no fowl, no fish. Sometimes you'll hear people say, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I eat fish. And it's like, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but you're not a vegetarian. So what it means to be vegetarian is you eat no meat, no fowl, no fish. What it means to be vegan is you eat nothing that comes from any animal.
I understand. So another question that I am personally confused about is some people doctors even, medical doctors, who say that it is dangerous actually to be a vegan because you will miss out on some nutritional items, iron, that type of thing. Can you tell me your viewpoint on that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's really not a viewpoint. I really go back to the science on this. It's very clear and has been very clear for the past several decades that, and certainly according to the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, a vegan diet can be fully optimal for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, growing children, athletes, and the elderly. So there are certain nutrients that you want to look out for. The one that is really important, because it is the only nutrient not reliably found in the plant kingdom, is vitamin B12. So vegans do need to supplement that. And sometimes people say, well, that just proves it's not natural to be vegan. Well, the American Academy of Medicine is also saying that anybody over 50 needs to supplement B12 regardless of their diet because it's very hard to extract from food, and when people get to be a little bit older, they need some help with that. So one of my dietitian friends, Jenny Messina, is fond of saying, well, if that means it's not natural to be vegan, it's also not natural to be over 50. So B12, unlike any other vitamin, is made by bacteria, and we just don't get it from our nice washed plant foods. It is found in animal foods because, frankly, they're just dirtier. Now, some of the other nutrients that people like to bring up, you mentioned iron. Iron is actually more plentiful in the plant kingdom than in animal foods, but the phytates in vegetables, and some certainly have more than others, can impede the absorption of some of that iron. So you do things like using a vitamin C-rich food like lemon juice, with your high iron food, your dark leafy greens. You can cook in cast iron, particularly something like pasta sauce that's acidic. You're going to get more iron that way. Using blackstrap molasses in a smoothie, that's just like an iron supplement. And when you look at the statistics, the young women who tend to be iron deficient, women of childbearing age, it's 50-50. Vegans and omnivores have the same level of problems with iron. So that just shows that some women are going to have that issue and others are not. And so if you have it, you need to pay a little more attention to it. But certainly it should not keep you from being vegan. And really any other nutrient that comes up, vegans do beautifully as long as they pay a little bit of attention. And I could say that for anybody's diet.
That makes sense. That's very, very helpful. I mean, speaking, from the vitamin B12 perspective, I'm sure you've had experience. If, for example, I was vegan and I had a vitamin B2, and I'm over 50, and I have a vitamin B12 deficiency, what type of symptoms would I have?
At first, you would notice brain fog, fatigue, maybe a little bit of tingling, numbness in your fingers and toes. Hopefully you wouldn't let it get that far. Later on, there could be more memory loss. You also see that your homocysteine levels, when your doctor checks that in your annual checkup, would be elevated, and that, of course, is a problem for the heart. And the worst thing, ultimately, is totally left untreated, you end up with irreversible nerve damage. So you don't want to do that. You want to just take your B12 and all will be well.
You bet, you bet. And it's, like you said, it's not really, that deficiency, and I know that because of my medical background, it's inherent in a lot of systemic medical conditions alone. So I understand that, but this really clarifies it. So my next question is, being a vegan and really focusing on clean, healthy, even raw foods, someone who's has been eating animal products their entire life, do you recommend that they gradually wean into the way of eating, or is it something that you should just do it one day?
It really depends upon the kind of person you are. I always give the example of when you were dating, or maybe you're still dating. If you're the kind of person who can break off a bad relationship as soon as it's pretty obvious that it's going south, then you're the kind of person who can probably just make an immediate turnaround in your diet and you'll be fine. Most people need to do it more gradually. So it's been shown in psychological studies that if you set a goal that isn't the complete goal that you want to ultimately achieve, but you get to that goal. So let's say you are going to cut out chickens and eggs. And that's always what I recommend to people because it just saves more lives. So many people say, well, I don't eat red meat. And as an ethical vegan, that makes me sad because that means that actually more animals are dying to feed you than if you ate some red meat and didn't do the chickens and eggs. So let's just say you're going to start with that. And you're going to set yourself a goal for 90 days, no chickens and eggs. And that's a lot because eggs are found in a lot of things. They're in pancakes and cupcakes and other kinds of things that maybe you would like to be making more healthfully anyway. So you learn how to do that. And then you go on and say, okay, now next thing, I'm going to do something different. Maybe you want to get rid of cheese. Cheese is very addictive. It has a substance in it called casomorphin, which sounds like morphine because it actually is a morphine derivative, mild. However, not all that mild when we think about how many people say, oh my gosh, I could do this, but I couldn't give up cheese. So the next 90 days, in addition to the chicken and eggs, you're not going to do any dairy cheese. You can discover all the wonderful vegan cheeses out there. And then you do this, and within a year's time, you are a vegan, and you're comfortable with it because it's not this overnight big shock.
That is really very helpful. You know what is going through my mind while you're talking is, believe it or not, cigarette smoking. And my mother and father, when I was young, they were cigarette smoking. I remember my father he quit cold turkey. He was fine with doing that. With my mother, it took a gradual process. So, some people need to do it a little at a time. Some people can go right to it, I would imagine.
That's it. And the wonderful thing about this way of life that I always love to emphasize is so much is involved here. And every time you choose to eat a vegan meal, you are doing so much for your own body and so much for the planet. A lot of people are not aware that according to the UN and the World Bank, animal agriculture is responsible for more greenhouse gases than all transportation combined. So I think we feel so powerless sometimes about some of these big issues out in the world, but to just know that every time you choose a plant-based meal, you're making a contribution to a better world, and that helps you stick with it too when you know you're really part of something bigger.
That's wonderful. That actually segues right into my next question is, and I'm sure you've experienced it, people that you work with experience it, but let's talk about how being vegan affects, and you talked about the planet, which I certainly appreciate because that's one of our principles that we follow, is how will you feel different in a positive way physically? What physically may you notice with your body?
It really depends on where you are when you start.
Okay.
I would not be telling the truth if I said the only way you can be healthy is to eat a vegan diet. I mean, there are plenty of people who eat lots of fruits and vegetables. They don't have a lot of meat. The meat that they eat isn't processed. They exercise, they sleep, they meditate. I would be a fringy idiot to say, oh, that person's going to die soon. Obviously that person's doing well. And if that person opts to become vegan as well, then I believe that they're going to be doing a whole lot better. Now, whether they're going to really feel different, if they're already fit, they're already a healthy weight, they might not notice very much. But some of the things that people do notice, one is that if you're really doing this with whole foods, there are a lot of vegan processed foods available now, and it is great that if you really, really want a donut or you really need a pizza, it is out there in vegan form. However, if you choose to concentrate more on real food, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, nuts and seeds, and wonderful items that you can make from that, then you are probably going to lose some weight. If you've got some weight to lose, your blood pressure will lower if it's a little bit high or even if it's a lot high. Your cholesterol will go down markedly within about 3 weeks' time. It's really phenomenal what can happen in that way. Also, a lot of people report that they don't have the seasonal allergies and the sniffing and the itchy nose and that kind of thing that many people say they've had all their lives because they have a slight undiagnosed problem with dairy. I'm not going to go as far as to say a dairy allergy, but a dairy sensitivity, which affects a lot of people, and they don't even know they have it until they get off the dairy, and then all of a sudden they're not clearing their throat every time they go to speak.
That's fascinating. I'll share with you that I am not 100% vegan, but I am doing what you had alluded to before, is I'm taking a little at a time. And I can tell you, and I'm really interested to hear what you think of this, is that physically I have noticed more energy. That's the first thing. And then emotionally I have noticed more mental clarity, meaning I can focus easier. Now, am I off base? Is this vegan related, or what do you think?
I think it is. Because
okay.
If you look back, we've talked a lot about modern Western science, but if you look back to the first nutritionists who were the yogis in ancient India, they were looking at the perfect diet for meditation. What should people eat who need to sit for long periods of time, who need to have a body that can be very still, very strong? And what they saw was that if people ate a predominantly plant-based diet, that then they didn't have the hyperstimulation that comes from foods like eggs and fried foods and this kind of thing. And they also didn't have the sleep-promoting, the fatigue-promoting kinds of foods, things like meat and fermented foods, foods that are old and stale and have been around for a long time. So they had this beautiful middle way with the fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. And that's really so close to what we're talking about now, and people do report just what you're saying. And I think, too, and certainly I know for myself, I just feel a sense of peace because at least I know that I'm living without harming. I'm not supporting the slaughter industry, the factory farming industry, and I can't save the world. I can't even save all the animals. But I just know that I'm not actively harming one today, and I think there's some freedom just in that.
I agree. So Victoria, with regards to spirituality, spiritual development, is there a spiritual reason why you are vegan?
There really is. It was actually my study of yoga back in my teens that got me to be vegetarian. I did have a little trouble making it to vegan because of my binge eating disorder. But once I took care of that, really from a spiritual recovery program, and then I was able to choose how I wanted to eat, and I chose vegan, it's really gone hand in glove. I think that one part of the spirituality of veganism is what we were just talking about, what happens to your body. You really are, maybe at the risk of sounding a little bit new agey, you're vibrating at a higher level. Your cells are getting clear, pure fuel. Your bloodstream is cleaner. Things are working well. And no matter how spiritual we want to be, any kind of spiritual enlightenment, any kind of spiritual experience that comes to us when we're on this earth has to be cycled through the body. And in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we are told that the body is the temple. So for me, feeding it the best foods, the kindest foods that I know how is part of doing that. And in addition, I just believe so strongly that we are here to love one another. And when that was originally said biblically, it may have only been about other humans. But you know what? We're talking about 2017, and things have changed, and we have come to see that, for example, slavery, which nobody said was bad in the Bible. It says in there, slaves, obey your masters. But we have come to see now, as we have grown as a species, that, oh no, slavery, that's bad. We're not supposed to own other people. And I believe we are evolving into the place now where we see that we're not supposed to exploit other beings. So I think that it's a wonderful spiritual adventure to know that we're ushering in the way for more love and more compassion and more ways for more beings to be happy on this planet.
I love that. I have to say, I certainly love that response from you. And in your opinion, and I have heard different nutritionists around me talk about this, do you think that food, we are energy beings, do you think food has energy? And can you comment on the energy in like a processed food versus vegan raw food?
Absolutely. One of my great health mentors is Michael Greger, MD. He wrote a fabulous book called How Not to Die, great title. And he always talks about, if we're not going to go to the science to tell us where to eat, where are we going to go? And I think there is great wisdom in that and great value, and I am so happy that there's so much science out there pointing to a whole foods, plant-based diet. However, I go somewhere else also when deciding what to eat, and that's to my intuition. And there are certain foods that I can eat, and I know that at an energetic level, they're off the charts. One of those is green juice. When I have a green juice, I feel like I have been given a transfusion of life force energy, of youthfulness, of vitality. It's really there. So the fresh fruits, the fresh vegetables, the bright colors, either raw, lightly steamed, you just get a sense that this is giving you a boost that you're not going to get by something that's processed, something that's old, something that's dead.
I agree. That's wonderful. And I'll tell you what, my go-to drink is my green juice, and I make it with my magic bullet, and I love it. I mean, and I do. I mean, my moods are better. Physically, I feel more energetic. It's fabulous. So, great. Now, in concluding the interview, I always like to extend and you speak to science, you speak to resources, and I absolutely love that because that's really how we're based too. So, for guests who are maybe new in the process and they really want to investigate becoming vegan, are there any resources that you can offer that they investigate?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I would love for people to visit me at my website, mainstreetvegan.net. And it's Main Street because it's really about regular people. We're not talking about celebrities with chefs or people who started this back in the 60s and how they're doing what they're doing, out on the farm somewhere. This is regular people, regular jobs, regular families. To that end as well, my book, Main Street Vegan, is a wonderful, wonderful introduction to this way of life. And just to even Google, just people who are wonderful, people that I admire, the dietitian I mentioned, Virginia Messina, has a great web presence. She's fabulous. Dr. Greger's site is nutritionfacts.org. He does a 1-minute daily video every day, taken straight from the scientific literature on nutrition. Wonderful, wonderful archives there of you can just put in thyroid or lung cancer or whatever it is that you're interested in, and he's got something there that's very, very helpful. And then I'd also love to direct people to my podcast. It's live every week, and we now have 5 years of archives where we really get into every aspect of vegan living, the health, the nutrition, fashion, vegan fashion, animal-free and wonderful, parenting, sports, athletes, animal rights, the environment, the whole shebang, and that's Main Street Vegan. The Main Street Vegan podcast on Unity Online Radio.
Oh, that's perfect. That's really wonderful. Okay, and then any last words of wisdom for people who are about to embark on this adventure? Any words of wisdom?
Well, you used the perfect word. It is a grand adventure, and there's no wrong way to do it. I think sometimes people feel that before they can actually do something, they need to be an expert on it. But think about when you fell in love. You didn't know absolutely every single thing about this person. You just knew that's the person. And so you can start on the path to veganism with what you know right now. And between all the great books that are out there and all the information that's on the web, you can get educated really, really quickly. And just remember that you'll start out doing this with the information that you have. And as you gather more information, you'll probably make some changes. And you're right on time, doing fine on day one. And I don't even know how many days I've been vegan, however many days are in 34 years.
That's fabulous. Oh, this has been really a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, I'm so grateful that you have invited me. Thank you.
Yes.